friends, and all who are happy to be human. I'm very honored to welcome you here this evening. The Arne Næss stolen, which I did not steal. I was honored to receive this from Professor Næss during the last 10 years of his life with his dear wife, Kit Næss, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening with us. So I wish to thank Kit also for continuing to support the chair during these last 10 years since her husband passed away. But Arne, of course, lives on in the spirit of his phenomenal achievements during his life. Myself met Arne through a group of indigenous people at the University of Oslo. We were caught together at the entrance of the door when the medicine woman from the Navajo tribe was running out to give some tobacco to the thunder gods, because the thunder had just cracked through the sky. So this is my memory of meeting Arne Næss for the first time. And so the depth of indigenous and the connection to nature, and to be at the Academy of Sun at that time was very profound. I was invited to meet the elders. I was honored to be invited as one of the elders of Norway at that time. And since then, of course, and before, I've been concerned. Is Norway the right place for me to be? Why am I here? To do the work of Tao, Taiji Chuan. So my devotion to Taiji Chuan in Norway, and the joy and the implicit gratitude I feel for meeting Professor Næss and his dear wife, has been one of my closest inspirations and deepest motivations for staying in this beautiful country with you amazing Norwegians. So thank you for receiving me for 35 years. This is 35 years I've been here, and it has led us to meet here tonight on this very, very powerful constellation and this pulse of human life that brings us together. So the phenomena of how we move together and how we separate is nature itself. And I do believe that the human condition is wise enough to bring us forward into a good future for our children. So I gather my friends as often as I can. And maybe tonight is quite a few new friends I see in the crowd, to meet absolutely two brand new, extraordinary people in my life. On my right shoulder and my left. This is the first time we've had the Professor Arne Næss stolen by the chair, the academic chair from the University of Oslo, flanked closely as a husband and wife team. So the Arne Næss chair, which is over there in the corner, for those of you who don't know, is always receiving the academic chair each year. And I always say that it's easy to get the academic chair, not so easy to sit in the actual chair of Arne Næss, to be challenged and to really speak one's truth as far and as deep as possible with this gathering and constellation of people. So it's all about us tonight, as it always is. And the chair this year is Mary Evelyn Tucker. I can't imagine how I can possibly introduce such a person who has touched me so profoundly already in the 3 days that I've known you. And it gives me great joy to see you sitting here at my Taiji Center. So the deepest and warmest welcome to you, Mary Evelyn.
Thank you.
And the fact that you have brought your husband along is the balance of yin and yang, the ultimate truth, that I can stand to hold that balance between you this evening. It's a great honor, sir, to receive you, John, also. I know you have great wisdom to share with us this evening, and I think the fact that you're both sitting together makes a huge, phenomenally big difference in terms of what Arne spoke about. He never spoke about the gender problem. He was always rooted in beyond gender, going as high as possible behind any kind of conflict between the right and wrong. So this is what really brought my spirit into this truth of beyond gender. So on the morning of his passing, I was given these 2 chairs from Arne's wife. This is the first time we've had, as I say, the Arne Næss husband and wife team. It's power-packed chairs, I can tell you right now. And I'm very, very honoured that I can introduce them to the Taiji Center, to the Koddatun, to Oslo, and to the Norwegian people. This is for peace. For all generations to come. And these 2 words Arne gave me. Now we've met Pamela. How do we stay close? So I wish that we can stay close this evening and listen. Let's just take a moment to be quiet together and listen. Spirituality, Chi, Deep Ecology.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pamela, and other friends who are here. I am deeply moved to see you get just a glimpse of your journeys from your faces, from your intensities. It's a very special group, I can feel, and I've spoken to many, many groups. And for whatever reasons, in a country that has the Nobel Peace Prize, that has Arne Næss, has Gro Brundtland, had Thor Heyerdahl, had such great, great contributions to our planet in these last few decades. Our common future comes out of Norway, I feel, in that Brundtland report in very special ways. So our journey also begins with that tremendous sense of concern for the environment, for our people, our planet, and our peaceful future. May it be so. And my deepest gratitude is to my husband, whose specialty is Native American traditions. And we've been adopted into a Crow family in Montana. And this summer we were greatly privileged because of John's work to be there for the Sundance. And it's the 10th time that he has danced. And when he dances without food and water for 3 and 4 days, it's for all people. It's for all species. It's for all life. And it's so moving to see that happen with people who are still deprived of rights, of jobs, of education, and it's heartbreaking. And yet they keep these traditions alive, like your Sami people, like indigenous peoples in the Amazon and all over the world. They are spokespeoples for our future as well. So to share this life and share this journey with John is one of the greatest joys. And the other persons I want to invoke here are our teachers, especially Thomas Berry. And I hope some of you will have a chance to read his books. There's a website and these resources left here, but we'll be happy to send books to the center. Because Thomas Berry was truly someone I think each one of you would have appreciated. And some of his talks you can still hear. Our students, even at Yale, say when we teach a course on him and they watch his talks and they say, I'm so glad I met Thomas Berry. He was truly an extraordinary person, someone, a historian of religions, but also had this vision of the life of these processes of nature and the universe and a universe story. And so his great vision is truly the grounding of our life and everything that we have tried to do in World Religions and Ecology, but also Journey of the Universe, a film and a book and so on, telling the great story of our 14 billion year unfolding universe and earth processes. And again, we'll make sure you have the access to the film and book and so on. So that's a bit of our lineage, and like every human, we have our ancestral lineage, and so our parents and grandparents and on past in the ages, and we're at the Viking Museum today, all of the great ancestors here in Scandinavia and around the world. We're asking their blessings on our future, our collective future. So I have some slides which I'm happy to share. I'm also happy to talk, actually, because I think Chi has such extraordinary dimensions and contributions to our life right now. So let me just say a few words about Chi, and maybe we can do just 10 minutes of the slides, and John can say a few words, and we can have some discussion. Does that sound good? Because, of course, we academics can talk for a long time, as you know, but we want to have some discussion. But Chi is something that I would say almost saved my life in a way. And by the way, these are my notes for for this talk in case I lose my thread. You know, you have to write things on napkins and so on. But I just want to share with you on a personal level why Chi is so important and why I think what the work of this center is doing is extraordinary, and especially in this location across from the Sovereign Wealth Fund and so on and so forth. Because I went to Japan in 73, 74, leaving behind the second Nixon election, which doesn't look too bad compared to what we have right now. But let's not talk politics tonight, because we are living through a disaster, I can assure you. And that's why we need Qi. We need Qigong, we need Tai Chi, we need these spiritual practices, because the future is going to be difficult, but we can manage with centers like this, with practices like this, with grounding like this. So I went to Japan to escape the horror of the Vietnam War and the Nixon administration. I was very involved in civil rights and so on. But going to Japan totally changed my life. And I was there for 2 years, spoke home once. You know, such a different world, because it was very expensive to be even talk to home. But I immersed myself. I was teaching at a women's college. Fantastic. I learned so much. You know, every time you travel, you learn so much. But our students are continually teaching us, even now. But going to Japan really changed my life, because not only was I escaping the political turmoil of the 60s, but I was maybe not even how conscious I was to escape the torrents of materialism, the torrential sensibilities that are displayed even now, as we know, in consumerism, but also in the earth as just materials to be used, a resource for us. So that expression on two fronts, consumerism and the use of resources, is a materialist worldview, which, as you know, it has left us spiritually bankrupt, vacant, vacuous, addictions, longings for peacefulness are so deep in our societies. And as I say, our U.S. society, it leaves me sleepless at night when I think of our students, what they're struggling with, the levels of addiction across our society. And so much of it is because I really think people understand on a very deep level we are up against some of the greatest challenges humans have ever faced. And I do feel, and because I have a wonderful husband, teachers, friends, I do feel we can manage through this. But even as Ed Wilson, great scientist at Harvard, would say, we're going through a bottleneck and we're losing species. We're losing life forms. And we're going to be mourning this. But hopefully there will also be morning coming to the daylight and so on. But I want to come back to why Qi is so important. Because clearly Qi is a worldview and a practice that brings together matter and spirit. It brings together the sense that this is dynamic, changing, alive, vibrant ecosystems with all kinds of plants and animals and everything that Arne Næss understood of deep ecology. That these are so alive, in fact, mysteriously dynamic, interchanging. Dynamic disequilibrium is what one ecologist speaks of, Daniel Botkin. So the aliveness of the world, the differentiated sentience in terms of animals, birds, caribou, fish, migrating patterns of salmon that you have up and down your coast, migrating patterns of the caribou, the reindeer people who follow those incredible animals. How do they understand where to go for their spawning, for their returning of their life forms? The great turtles and so on. And many of these species are hundreds of thousands of years old. We were just in the natural history area yesterday looking at the ginkgo, which is 270 million years old. It's actually called a fossil species because it was here before the dinosaurs. You see, this is the kind of deep time that we're being invited into, of how ancient some of these forms of life are, still living. And ginkgos are Chinese, in their origin, but live well in cities, actually. So Qi is the thing that I think can knit us back into these extraordinary processes of nature, of life, of resilience, of spirit and matter, not as divided, not as Descartes would say, I'm the only thinking creature, and these other creatures are not thinking, so we can have factory farming of animals, and so on and so forth. But people are not dumb. And when you feel Qi in Qigong or Tai Chi or in the martial arts or in traditional Chinese medicine, we've been having shiatsu done for us for 20 years, and it has completely sustained, I feel, our life. I take no medicine, fortunately, but this question of where our grounding is what I'm putting forward here. And so going to Japan, experiencing this in some of their traditions, and practicing it over several decades has really been a gift in my life in so many ways. So I can tell you about it in theory. I've written a book on how this works as a philosophy and so on. But most important is the practice, for sure. And so I just wanted to share that with you. That Qi is something that not only overcomes materialism, but it weaves us into the living processes of earth, of nature, of species, and that is our way forward. There's no other way forward without it. So that's the value of this center. In a society like Norway that has, I feel, a primal sensibility towards the natural world. And this is what Arne Næss opened up with Deep Ecology. But all of you who love the forest, who love being in maybe a little country cottage or along the fjords or whatever, this is splendid, you see? And that is Norway's gift to the world. Your own forms of deep ecology. I really mean it. And don't let anyone say, this is romantic, this doesn't matter, that we're going to solve these problems by ecosystem services and monetizing nature. Important, necessary, but not sufficient. Because the depths of your understanding of nature, along with this deep feeling for chi, I think are powerful ways forward. Absolutely powerful ways forward. The final thing I'll say in this little bit, and maybe John would like to contribute to what I've just said, is Pamela said a lovely thing as we had some soup just a moment ago, delicious and nourishing soup. And she said, to be vulnerable is maybe one of the most important things in our world, in our life. And I feel that. I feel it tonight. You know, I can't express how vulnerable I feel. Not, you know, the academic, whatever, papers and books, doesn't really matter. What matters is a connection to groups like yours who I feel your deep attention. I feel your sense of care, of compassion, of love, of joy, of resilience, of struggle. All of it is sitting right here before me. And it could make me weep, you see, because I feel it so strongly. But I also feel your strength, your way forward, and that gives me a certain strength. But vulnerability is indeed what we need to be as people. People to people, life to life, life force to life force. And that is what she is, a life force that will sustain all of us. So I want to just say that, and then we can perhaps go on to slides. Is that okay? Yeah. So this may sound a little more of the academic side of things, but I wanted to, as Pamela kind of encouraged it, I would say, to maybe just share what is Confucianism and what is Taoism, and how do these go together as a system that has grounded people for 5,000 years. These are some of the most ancient systems in the world. So let's see. So this is one of the very few pictures of Confucius that we know of from his birthplace. And by the way, the characters at the top, meaning a teacher going forward on the road. And you may know Confucius felt he was never successful in his lifetime. He could never get a governor to actually listen to him. And yet his teachings are probably, in all of the world's literature of religions, as more people have followed Confucianism just because of the numbers in China. And this Confucianism happens to be my specialty, but I love Buddhism, I love Taoism, and so on. So this tradition, as you also may know, has family regulations, relation to parents, to brothers and sisters at its heart. Filial piety, this idea of respect and care for parents, honoring parents through behavior, respecting one's body as a gift, revering ancestors and elders, the importance of a male heir. But for me, what became so important was filial piety wasn't only to family, but it was to nature and the cosmos. Because cosmos, earth, and human, that's the trinity of triad of Chinese thought. So cosmos and earth are the great parents to humans. And you literally give back a sense of reciprocity and gratitude, you see, to the whole universe and to all of nature. That's what sustained me in my PhD work, that kind of thinking. Now, social order and human relations are key. When you take this number of people. Harmony and so on are very important. And I want to say, as I said yesterday at the university, Confucianism has its dark side. There's problems and there's promise, and sometimes it's very autocratic, and of course treatment of women. So I'm not trying to over-idealize this, but just present some of its key ideas. So the social ordering was the ruler and the minister, and it was supposed to be reciprocal. The minister could remonstrate to the king, the emperor, husband and wife. All of these were intended to be reciprocal relations, parent and child, older brother and younger, friend to friend. So there was a notion of a mutual respect for a common good. Of course, it was very often hierarchical. It could be manipulated and so on. But the sense that we live in community. So this is a tradition that has a very high sense of communal relationships, not just hyper-individualism. And it has an appeal because of its communitarian base. So philosophy and education began with the notion that human nature is essentially good. Mencius's teaching of this very simple story. A child was about to fall into a well, and anyone would immediately come to help that child, save that child, which indicates the goodness of human nature. It's very innate, and that's what all of Confucian education is based on. We're given seeds of virtue, and these seeds can be watered and cultivated and so on to humaneness, to a loving, caring person. So the goals of moral behavior then are to practice righteousness, to sharpen moral intuition, to contribute to society and the common good. So moral behavior becomes a basis of civil society. That's why the civil service exam system was so important. That was picked up in the West by the French philosophes, a civil service exam system, and it spread through the West. So civil servants were supposed to be morally servants to the whole society. And to give a sense of harmony in their behavior, in their actions, in their decisions. You may have a few more of those in Norway than we have in the US, I might say. Okay, so political theory was that the moral ruler has the right to rule, has a mandate of heaven, and Mencius even said if that moral rule was lost, there was a right of revolution, which is very, very interesting. Very quick story. We were going through one of the great exhibits years ago of the Xi'an warriors that had come from the tomb of the first emperor of China, and the guide was taking Nixon through earlier on, and she said, "Oh, the mandate of heaven means the ruler has the moral right." And all of a sudden she saw his face go white because he had lost his moral authority and so on. But that's in principle the political idea. The cosmological integration is this. That's the temple of heaven at the top. There's a temple of earth here, and then humans offering their life and their work actually to ensure the continuity of life processes in nature and so on. And there's no radical break in this system between. So this means heaven, by the way, which means something over your head, your arms outstretched with an idea of embrace, and the human is right there in the center. So, and it's not heaven like we might think of it. It's cosmos. It's universe. Okay. So, if I had had time, I would go through some of these great texts. But the last one I'll just pick up, Chung Sai's Western Inscription. This is one of the most famous texts in all of Chinese thought. And it is, "Heaven is my father, earth is my mother, and even a small child as I has a place in their midst. Those who are without parents or without guardians are part of my family." So this notion of the whole family of humans is crucial in that saying. It's an absolutely beautiful passage. Now here we come to Qi. Again, you know this, matter, energy, the translations, material force, vital energy. I can assure you we don't have good enough words in English to really describe what Qi is. But the idea of Qi certainly involves self-cultivation. So from texts, from tradition, from rituals, and then from embodied practice, like Tai Chi and Qigong, the healing medicine of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture and massage, cultivating vibrant and resilient qi, to be in harmony with all living things, or what's called the 10,000 things. And this is, as you know, widespread practice in China of Tai Chi and Qigong in all the parks. How many of you have been to China? So all the parks, will have people doing this and so on. But the practice has come for many decades now to the West, and that's very exciting. So one of the reasons I'm just presenting this, there's a cultural background to all of this, but its presence here in the West, I think, is very exciting, very vibrant, and transformative. So I'm going to go to Taoism. And by the way, Qi is shared by both Confucianism and Taoism. Some people think Qi is more Taoist, but not really. So we have Lao Tzu here, and you had this beautiful character of the way, the path, the Tao that was just hanging here. So the way and its power, this wonderful text, I'm sure many of you have read it, the Tao Te Ching, and it's the most significant Chinese text, perhaps one of the most translated texts in all of world history, the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao, this profound mystery, it's immutable, it's subtle, it's elusive, it's ineffable, it's vital, creative, pervasive, and powerful. And many more words as well. And again, I'm sure you know this, so it's just reinforcing what you already know. So views of life that's celebrating being. And here you have a Tai Chi master celebrating this life force and the being that is flowing through him. And by the way, as you also know in Tai Chi, so many of the movements are actually imitating or bringing in what we like to think of as the powers of nature, the birds, butterfly movements, wind and air currents, and all of this kind of thing. So we're bringing in the more than human world into our own being through doing Tai Chi or Qigong. So the values of simplicity and natural harmony with the Tao are what to be cultivated. The values of non-purposeful action, that action that's understated. I think this is also very Norwegian, the understated, quiet, reserve. But you know the term is wu wei, non-purposeful action, right? So the personal path that's described in images that reflect virtues, often taken from nature. For example, a feminine principle of yielding, of molding, passive, accepting. These can be a little overdone, but that's very much in this text. Water that wears down strength. You see it, of course, in your great fjords. A vessel that supports and maintains. So these are all images implanted in this very poetic text that give us a sense of what is virtue, of how to be human, of how to live a life. So the uncarved block, this is like Michelangelo. If you've been to Florence and you see David at the end of the hall, but you see these prisoners that are still in these blocks of uncarved rock. Very powerful, how he could see his figure in these rocks. A political path, even a leader who's one who governs least. This happens to be a maestro, but a splendid musician, who knows just how to bring out the music from his orchestra, for example, as well as a political leader who can do that without insistence. That's a Taoist political way. So we've got this paradox, the coincidence of opposites in the yin and yang, which is a tremendous sense of overcoming that dialectic of Hegel and so on in our Western thought, this wonderful inclusive coincidence of opposites. Chuangzi, the other great early writer, who had skepticism and mysticism and laughter and paradox and delight in his texts. Whoops, just one more. So there's this notion of an inner landscape of qi. If you're looking at a Chinese landscape painting, the aesthetic is actually what is the qi there in that painting. And the master who was painting it is bringing forward their experience in the site, pre-impressionist, plein air, bringing that sense of what is it like to be in front of these trees, these waterfalls, these magnificent mountains, and so on. So when we see these paintings, it's bringing qi to life for all of us. And that's the aesthetic here. And as you know, the human is very small in these landscape paintings of China. So if we just summarize here for contracts, Confucianism and Taoism, Confucianism would have this primary causality, namely like closeness to the force of life, to the Tao itself, to the the wu, the nothingness of things. Whereas Confucianism has secondary causality. The human is important. There's agency in the human. Human affairs are crucial. Contemplation is critical for the Taoists. Nature is moral for Confucians. Nature may be neutral for the Taoists. Social political involvement is critical for Confucians. So social political withdrawal is more important for the Taoists. Influence in political ethics, very crucial. Influence in the arts and spirituality for the Taoists. The highest figure was considered a sage or a teacher, whereas the hermit was crucial for Taoists. Engaging in life, for Confucians, preserving life. This is part of TCM, medicine and healing arts, even to the Qigong. So we can also make these masculine, feminine gestures, assertive and passive action and non-purposeful action, directing the stream, flowing with the stream. Learning is emphasized, whereas ignorance is valued. These are things that weave themselves into one another, though. It's not a strict dualism. But I do like to say with my husband, John, that he's very much a Taoist. I'm a Confucian, and that, I think, makes the juice flow, and it's wonderful to have a partner like that. So I'm going to conclude this part of my discussion, invite him to say a few words, and then we'll open it up to comments and further discussion. Sound good? Okay.
Mary Evelyn, it's good to share the microphone, and I'll express my gratitude also for being here with all of you. It's lovely to have a chance to make some comparative remarks. So I wanted to fold into Mary Evelyn's attention to Qi in the East Asian world with three brief examples drawn from indigenous perspectives that I've encountered in my work. And first, the Navajo tradition, or people who call themselves Dene. The Dene speakers, all of their language cousins of the Navajo of Dene, are up in Canada. So they come from a large language family, but two groups, the Navajo and the Apache, they left the Canadian regions and they went down eventually into the Southwest, and they made a transition in their stories and understanding of where the world came from. In the Canadian region, they were quite close to Raven in their creation stories. And as they came into the northern plains, they encountered people who spoke of coyote and the trickster coyote. And they carry these in their tradition very lightly to this day. But when they arrived in the Southwest, they took on the worldview and the creation stories of the Pueblo people in that region. So the Rio Grande, the settled agricultural peoples, influenced these hunter-gatherers who themselves became agriculturalists as they came into the Southwest. And the Navajo, in taking this new worldview, they articulated their version of this understanding of having come out of 4 prior worlds, and that they came up into this world, and they found a world that they described as Nilchi, wind, holy wind. So the point I wanted to draw out is that among the Dene people, the largest Native American group in the United States, over 300,000 Dene or Navajo peoples throughout the country, they have a sense that this world is vibratory. It's a world that's constantly moving. It's a wind world. So some scientists studying quantum physics have actually found the Navajo language focused on verbals, in other words, not a noun-oriented language, but a verbal, participial, and ing language, if you catch my drift, that it's a language which has developed to try and express this vibratory world, a world that comes and goes, ika. That's what they call their sand paintings. So that when they lay down these dry paintings for a healing ceremony, what it is an effort to evoke and participate in the winds that are this creation. So they would say, all of us humans, we show the signs of the winds that came into the womb of our mothers to create us with the wind from our fathers and the insemination of newborn life, and that remains with us in our fingerprints. That the fingerprints are the wind that is moving in and out of us, and also the patterns on the top of our head, the spirals, are the signs of that movement of the wind. So that peoples other than East Asian have also had this sense of a vibratory movement within the world. And of course the Navajo understand it in different ways than East Asia, this movement of an action in the world, of an energy in the world. There's so many lovely stories in this regard, but I didn't want to use up my moment at the microphone to tell Navajo stories. I'm moving towards a Salish story, but in between, I wanted to mention Lakota people. I think Lakota are more well known. They're often called named by the term Sioux, S-I-O-U-X. It's a word, ironically enough, which is not even in their language. The Sioux people, in their own understanding, are Lakota. That's in the South Dakota region. Where I come from, in North Dakota, that same group of people speak a dialect called Dakota. In Minnesota, where many of your relatives may travel to and visit, the group there speaks Nakota. So it's a large language family that when the French fur traders were coming into the Great Lakes region, they asked Anishinaabe, another language group, Ojibwe or Chippewa people, they asked this, who are those warlike people out on the plains? And the Anishinaabe, who were their enemies, said, they're Nade Sioux. They're vipers who will bite you. So these people, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, they actually carry in the English version their language, and the name that's given to them is not even in their own tongue. So this is actually typical of many names of North American people in English. It's not the name that the people themselves call themselves. But I just wanted to focus on this language group. The Lakota have in their understanding also a sense that this world is vibratory. And they have their own way of looking at it, and they have a term for it. They speak of skan. And among Lakota wisdom teachers or their elders, they will speak sometimes of taku skan, namely everything in reality that we see is in movement. And what's most powerful, I find, for these people is that when it comes time to represent skan, they see the most appropriate expression of skan is stone. I think that's a powerful insight, that even that which people might take as immovable or not moving, for these people is the expression of this dramatic change found in reality. So the Dene in their sense of wind, and Lakota people in the sense of stone, the Sweat Lodge of Northern Plains people, which I participate in regularly when we go to visit our family and when we go into any ceremonial among Northern Plains people. In fact, most Native American peoples, including Navajo, have their own version. The sweat ceremony is preparatory. One doesn't go into a ceremony for the Crow people that I study with without being adopted by someone who will teach you, and then you prepare yourself by sweating in the presence of stone. So the water, the stones heated, brought into the small lodge, water poured over them, and then those stones speak and purify that steam that comes off of the stone. So again, Lakota people, Northern Plains people, a very interesting sense of the vibratory character of the world, which is constantly speaking to us and teaching. It's not a mute world. It's a world of constant exchange and speaking. Speaking. Let me end with just a comment on another large family, a language family, the Salish-speaking peoples in the northwest of the North American continent. And I've had, since 1985, the privilege of going to a winter dance ceremonial. And that ceremonial, it begins in the evening and it goes overnight and it ends in the morning. It's 4 days long. And this ceremonial is focused on the singing of songs that have been given to individuals. Some of these songs, they sound like they have come from Russia. You know, the influence of Russia into the Northwest coast. They're such lyrical songs. They're so beautiful. Some of them, they sound like they have come from stone, from trees, from wind. They are so archaic. It's not possible to pick them up in any of the European musical tonalities. So it's very interesting. Now, these are people who have brought in a number of influences, and they also have a term that they use to talk about this song of reality. As one elder said to me when I was trying to understand the winter dance, he says, everything has a song. Even a little baby. When you listen to it, its call and its sound is trying to find its way. And that song, say the interior Salish people of Washington State, is Sumish. It's a power. It's a capacity to really transform the world. And it can be found in the most unusual moments. During this winter dance, the singing of songs becomes quite overt, and you can hear the sound of these powerful insights of the people. But when the morning comes and the ceremony ends for that day, there'll be occasion to have some food together, and then the telling of stories before people take a nap or have a sleep before the evening ceremony begins again. And after eating then, the telling of stories. And at one point, I was sitting with all of us who are participating in this particular dance, and one elder whom I had met, she was such a remarkable woman. She was Wenatchee, a Wenatchee elder who I was told when she walked into the PTA meetings, all of the teachers sat straighter. Everyone looked up. She was a powerful woman. And there were 4 tables where people were telling stories. And I moved, being a good researcher, I moved from table to table. And they put up with me, all my nonsense. And at one point I came and sat next to her, and she was not talking at this point. An elderly gentleman was. And when he finished, there was a moment of silence. And she turned to me and she said, "Have I told you about the power of an ugly shawl?" And I looked at her and this is my first time here in 1985. No, I haven't heard this. And she looked then at the group and she said, "Years ago, I came over the 2 mountains to a winter dance. And at that winter dance, I received a shawl." It's typical for a singer, before a singer goes to the pole in the center of the room where this ceremonial is held, they'll literally put shawls and blankets and beaded work. They'll put it on their backs and over their arms, and they'll walk around in front of people after they've sung their first song. And if you can help them, you take something off them. If they gift the world and they're giving their burden, and if you then can help them carry the burden of life, you use what they have given to you. So Anne Mary Sampson, the woman telling the story, she says, a woman came after singing and she stood in front of me and I took a shawl from this woman to help her. And of course, many singers over the 4 nights, there's many gifts that one acquires. And she says, I went home after that winter dance and I was putting things away and I looked at that shawl. She said, I couldn't believe it. It was so ugly. It was such an ugly shawl. And she put it in her dresser. And she's telling all of us that was a mistake. That was improper. Before putting it away, she should have used it. She should have gone out once with it. She put it away. Years later, she said, I was going to a winter dance and I was preparing things to take along. And I had them all ready and I was going out the door and suddenly I remembered that shawl. And she said, I felt so bad. I'd never used it. So she went and got it and she put it over her shoulders and went over the 2 mountains to that winter dance. And when she came in, it would be a room like this, with some days as many as we are, just a very little room as we would crowd to the sides for the dancers to go around the singer in the middle. But always at that door back there, like that gentleman by the door, there's always a member who stands guard. If someone's singing, no one comes in or out. And she said, when I came to the dance, it was very strange. The door was open a bit, and the person standing by the door was looking in towards the middle. So she said, I stuck my head in, and there was a woman at the center pole, on the floor. She was twisting around. She was in a very disturbed state. What these people call the blue jay is on her back. And that's a very powerful medicine for these people. The elders and those wisdom keepers know that the blue jay will help them understand the weather coming that winter. So it's a very disturbing experience for the person undergoing it, but very helpful for the community. So this woman, Marianne Sampson, she decided, since there was this issue with the singer, she would just come in and go sit down. So she came in the door, and that woman saw her, and she stood up and she said, that's my shawl. And it wasn't the woman who had given it to her, but this woman came over, and Marianne Sampson looked at her, and she took off that shawl and she put it around her shoulders. And she said that woman straightened her hair and washed the smudges off her face. And Marianne said she sang her song for her people. And that woman looked at me and she said, that's the power of an ugly shawl. Embedded in reality then for these people, Sumish is this vibratory character that is even in such a thing as an ugly shawl. Oh.
So, time for stories, discussion, comments, critiques. What's on your mind? Yes, please.
It's very intellectual. It's not about the ugly shawl now. I'm sort of
That's fine.
out of the fairy tale here. Okay, when there is the ruling thing in Kufu, in the Bible, in the New Testament, Paul says, don't bother with the ones in power. They got their power from God, because he didn't want the Jews to fight the Romans, because they would lose and be exterminated. And with the French Revolution, there came this division of power that's very, very important for our democracy. That, the parliament, the government, and the judge system. And so I wonder. And then people like the North Korean, so I wonder, in the ruling, when you said the ruler, the good ruler, has the right to rule, do they have? Whereas in the West we are very concerned with reducing the power of the ruler, however righteous. I wonder, just a comment on that.
Well, that's a dissertation, but a very important comment, I think, or question. So the ideal or the idea in Confucianism is if the ruler and his civil servants cultivated themselves for being moral rulers, for being coherent with the common good for the larger society, and that included very practical things, like agriculture and irrigation systems and so on, to make things function for the common good. So I think you're quite right. The modern West has tried to develop something that would say there's contracts, there's limits to absolute rule, and so on. As I mentioned, the ministers were supposed to be some of that in the Confucian framework, and some of them lost their positions or their life if they were, very outspoken sometimes. So you're right that modern revolutions, from the French and American Revolution on, and the English Revolution preceding it, was to limit the power of rulers, and by the systems we have now, which not all of which are functioning in a certain country I need not name. So I think, yes, that's what modern institutional political theory has moved towards, and we still need to make it work in practice, I think.
I was asking in the Confucianism. I wasn't asking about the West. I was asking about these
Right.
things.
Well, what I was suggesting is that the Chinese emperor would have ministers for various, taxation or finance and so on, as well as agriculture, education, etc. So he had to rule in relation to his cabinet and so on and so forth, and a whole range of ministers below them that is a huge bureaucracy, that had the civil service exams from the very lowest levels of political, from the countryside all the way up, to the capital city. So that was the system. Not very imperfect and autocratic, and so on.
Maybe
But
seasons too, and changing clothes.
yeah, I mean, political theory in Confucianism is very developed from the Han period on, which is about 200 before the Common Era to 200 after the Common Era, when Confucianism became a political force. And the idea is there's a whole cosmology of correspondences of the directions, the seasons, and so on. So this is a very rich and complicated cosmology that lasted, right down through, 1911 is when the imperial lines collapsed with the revolution and so on. But with civil service exams, which started even back then, this was a political theory of rule by a meritocracy, actually, you see. But how you pass these exams was meritocracy, not hereditary. So, how about other comments, thoughts? Yes.
I just wonder,
Share the microphone.
Yeah.
does rebels have any place in Taoism or Confucianism?
Rebels? Did you-
Yeah, rebels,
Yeah.
like, if you understand what I mean,
Mhm.
for changing.
Yes, and that's why Mencius had this theory of revolution, that if the ruler lost his moral force, his moral mandate, there was a right to revolution. So that was part of how governments could change. Yeah. So yes would be the answer.
You should mention there were several armed rebellions by Taoists over the centuries.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yellow turbans and so on. Great. Yes.
The moral right to rule and heaven.
Uh-huh.
I believe in the Norse mythology or society, we also have that kind of political system, that if the ruler did not obey the people,
Mm-hmm.
he was thrown away, or they actually could kill him.
Mm-hmm.
So now we see another system, I believe, that is not so easy to throw away.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we just say a few words about what this kind of system, how does it come alive? Because it's not aliveness, it's something else, I believe. It's not listening to nature.
Yeah, you're talking about our
Yeah.
present system?
The present system we have, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing here is we are in crises of every institution we know. You know, political, and that goes for international, the UN and its governing power. I'm going to a meeting in another 2 weeks on international governance and that type of problem that we're up against. National governments clearly are not functioning as well as they should. You get a Brexit and you have, real chaos. But so in politics, in education, I would say our education systems are not really functioning in the way they should, and in a way that says what is I like to say flourishing future, not just sustainable future. Think of my relationship with John as flourishing, not just sustainable. So what is a flourishing educational system about that encourages children and others to think about their cosmology, their worldview, where they fit in, where's their practice. You could say the same with economics. We have new ecological economics, fortunately, and we've got new practices in business, and we have forms of Scandinavian socialism and mixed capitalism socialism, but Nordic societies, I think, have shown the way in more progressive forms of economics and social services. And we have in religion, terrible failures of, you take, the Catholic Church and so on. And we happen to come from, I would say, progressive forms of Catholicism, of social justice. And we think the Pope's encyclical is very, very important and what he's trying to do for a planetary consciousness. But to come back to, so all of these institutions are failing us. They're collapsing. You could say it's a breakdown for breakthrough, hopefully. I think that's probably very true. But the political one is exceedingly critical, especially, and as I say, I really don't want to go there because it's so awful, but across the ocean, what's happening, it's extremely troubling. I think it's our worst moment in American history, to be honest. And I think that, of course, we will survive it, and there's tremendous resistance. There's tremendous sense of rebellion on every level. And, there's 60% of the U.S. is Democratic, and that is our hope. But why are we tested like this? Because I think it's the last gasp of an American dream gone mad, which is materialism on steroids, which is manipulation, both consumerism and rape of the earth, you see? So it's a dream that cannot function, and people are grasping for the last straws of it, for the last meisms of it. And until we see, and this is why, I shouldn't go on about politics, but why was Bernie so successful? You see, because he was presenting socialism. You could hardly say that in America, and the younger generation gets this in a huge way. And it's why, with all the failures of Confucianism, a communitarian ethic and a political philosophy and an educational philosophy, it has a huge appeal even to our students, you see. We need communitarianism of certain sorts because liberty, equality, and fraternity that is just for the individual is insufficient. Okay, I've gone on. I'll get off the political platform.
Sorry, we're not living in the political. Do you think it's possible to combine the basic principles of Wu Wei from Taoism with the process of globalization?
Mm-hmm. So the question was to combine the principles of Wu Wei in Taoism with globalization.
And the question is also because if you were so kind to leave your map over, it says that in Confucianism, social political involvement is active, whereas in Taoism, withdrawal. That is not exactly true. In Taoism is more based towards the tribe. So the happy community would be the one that knew where the other one were, but never went to visit.
Yeah.
And that's not compatible with globalization, where we need, interstate solutions in so many ways. And that's, he's a bit like Rousseau. He wants to stay local. But he realizes that it's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think this is a very important question, and so on. And I'm going to turn it to Chris in a moment, who is a very fine green architect, and I think may have something to say about this. But I think, there's a whole book which says, E.O. Wilson is saying we can only preserve so much of the land, and we have to withdraw, we have to retreat to just certain amount of cities, and we've got to let the rest go for biodiversity and flourishing and so on. So there are proposals, you see, which are along these lines. But most significantly, I think the kinds of technologies, of alternative technologies, of green buildings, of eco-cities and things like that, which are moving from the periphery to the center. We knew many of these people in the U.S. whose ideas are now right on the forefront. John and Nancy Todd and David Orr and a whole range of people who had different energy solutions and so on, and building solutions. They're right at the center. So I think that's exciting. And we had dinner the other night with someone who's working on organic agriculture and IPM, the pest management type of thing that reduces chemicals and so on. He has a huge grant from the EU. He's based here and whatnot. So these were ideas that were way on the periphery. And I think they've moved to the center. And many of them, I think, have the less is more, Schumacher's idea, small is beautiful, and so on. I'm not saying that this is the way, but I am saying many of these ideas are now at the center of things, and people get less is more in certain ways. Otherwise, it isn't sustainable. Chris, you had your hand up, so I'm going to pass it over there. Thank you.
Poor old America gets a lot of flack these days, and I think it is worth remembering that America also has a lot of the very, very best people. And you have two examples. We have to remember that. I'm not going to talk about architecture, but I would say that green buildings are never going to work without green people. Just to pick up on something that John said about language, building is a verb. It's worth remembering. I thought the questions about Confucianism and the present Chinese system or whatever, I think are very interesting, because as John was talking about these kind of rituals in most cultures, if not all, to remind people of their place in the world somehow. And you probably know that big work called The Golden Bough, which is an old work of anthropology. I think in 12 volumes originally, which showed how we had a lot of these ceremonies in Europe until about 100 years ago, 150. The topping out ceremony, where you put a branch on a roof, is one of the last surviving ones. But there are also examples, for example, where tribes who had a king or a chief, that a normal person would become chief for a day. In other words, the king would be put down at the bottom. And I think you find quite a lot of examples where there is that deliberate limitation on power, which in some way they try to build into the system. Same with the divine madman in Tibetan Buddhism, for example. But you've gone through and studied so many world religions. Do you find that sort of thing coming out, this sort of deliberate effort to limit power or to put it back within community in many other religions as well?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I think yes, definitely. The sense of sharing, of a common concern for a larger good. But I think maybe some of what I'm picking up on is the rituals of the different world religions. What we're presenting in a book that we call Ecology and Religion, and we'll make a PDF file available to you. And the thesis there is that there's religious ecologies and religious cosmologies, and that all the world's religions have had ways of weaving themselves into the rhythms of the day, the rhythms of nature, the seasons. Why do we have Christmas and the winter solstice at the same time? These kinds of sensibilities. We're walking through the market the other day, and we noticed all the beautiful boughs of the fir trees that people are, bringing into their homes and so on this time of year. So the harvest rituals, the kinds of beautiful root crops that go into a vegetable soup and so on right now. So all of these sensibilities of food, of land, of seasons, of weather have gone deeply into religious rituals, which weave us, to say nothing of the cosmological sensibilities. And I think that does give a sense of limits, because we can't exceed these seasonal sensibilities. And by building that in, it gives a sense of grounding and purpose and rhythm and delight and joy, and brings up music and dance and celebration and so on. So at least in that respect, I think that there's a sense of weaving and limits and so on. Yeah, from the back.
When you talk about culture in Taoism, very, very interesting, of course, it's very bullshit.
Can you stand up, please, and speak a bit louder?
I would like to put that in a very simple way. The simple way is very meaningful too. What's your perception about the complementarity of Confucianism and Taoism, and your perception about the Qi, the element, the energetic element that the humans have, the individuals have, in relationship with the Confucianism and the Taoism? Because one perspective, not my perspective, but one perspective is when you see the complementarity in Confucianism and Taoism, it seems that the Taoism is nearer to Qi, to our reality as humans, to our reality as energetic organisms. Although it seems to be that the Confucianism has more of the element of the organization, society element there, and that don't take the perspective of the individual as the main perspective. Would you like to comment that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The University of Oslo should be listening to these questions. They're really excellent. So the question is, between Confucianism and Taoism, the suggestion is from this gentleman that Qi may be closer to Taoism, and what about Confucianism in relation to Qi? So I did this book called Philosophy of Qi that is a translation of a 17th century Japanese thinker. And it took me 25 years to publish because it's a very difficult idea. But let me give you a sense of what this person, Kaibara Eken, is called the Aristotle of Japan. And my own specialty is Japanese Confucianism, but we have to know the Chinese to know the Japanese Confucianism, because this person is deeply indebted to a tradition from China and Korea and Japan called, his philosophy was a monism of Qi, that Qi made up everything. But, as some of you may know, the philosophy has a Li, which means principle, and Qi, material force. So Li is the form within things, like John was talking about the fingerprint and the wind. So that which gives form, like a cookie cutter, if you will, okay? But everything has its inner form, like an oak, the acorn will become an oak. It won't become a daffodil or another botanical form. So every seed, every plant, every human, everything has an inner form. Now this is all Confucian, okay? And so there was this argument by three great thinkers and then others of the relationship of Li, form, and Qi, dynamic material force, okay? It's very interesting because it gets into this notion, is Li primary or does it precede Qi? Is it transcendent? You see, is it something out there? This thinker, Kaibara Eken, argued Li, or principle, is right in the Qi. So if you look at a leaf, you see that form, right? It's just extraordinary, of course, ferns and every kind of form right there. It's amazing. So what he also said was, as you do that and you're understanding that, this was a natural history philosophy actually, because he did the categorization of plants, of animals, of fish, of birds, and so on. Maybe I can pass this around and you can see some of the pictures. He was a great naturalist. And he was saying, as we study nature, should we just pass it around? We are actually cultivating ourself too. Because our qi, it's not like it's just undifferentiated, you see, just big smear or something. But our qi is in relationship to humans, to nature, to species, plants, etc. So this resonance between everything and all species is a cultivation of the self. That is amazing, don't you think? I think it's extraordinary. This kept me excited for 25 years, too. Because it puts us back in touch with the qi of the world as not undifferentiated, you see, as a smear, but as specific and as alive and as vibrant in each of these forms, And this is a huge philosophy that had immense implications, you see? And he is called the Aristotle of Japan because Aristotle also understood the form of things, you see? But it's a naturalist and scientific epistemology, but it's also the cultivation of the self. So it's not splitting science and cultivation apart. I think it's amazing. Yes, in the back.
I just want to say your presentation is so good. Actually, we learned Confucius and Taoist from primary school in China. So so many my foreigner friend, they ask me to explain what is Confucius and what is Tao and what is Qi. So actually, I think your delivery is very well. It's a real transport.
I very much appreciate that. And we had a wonderful discussion yesterday at the university about these issues. But I really had amazing teachers. I had teachers who felt, one of whom died just last year at 97 years old and was still teaching at Columbia, which has one of the greatest Asian studies programs on the planet. And he helped every one of us graduate students had to do, I did an earlier translation, but we had to do translations to make these available to the West, you see. And he also wanted to see how Confucianism was involved in human rights. And his colleague Du Wei-ming, who's a great Confucian scholar back on the mainland now, but he helped us, he was at Harvard, helped us with all these conferences on world religions and ecology. So these were great Confucian scholars, but also living the practice. So we're very indebted to them. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think on one of your slides you were writing coincidence of opposites.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, I always thought that the humans it's not a coincidence, but it's sort of a general principle of the way. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that coincidence of opposites.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a wonderful question. Of course, that comes from Joachim of Flores, I believe.
No, Nicholas of Cusa.
Nicholas of Cusa, thank you. A notion of coincidence of opposites. So, but I might rephrase that in a future. I would say it's the integration of opposites, which we could perceive as coincidence, but it's actually much more intentional in a yin-yang formulation, you see. So it would be saying within that form, the female is in the male and vice versa, light and dark, all of these opposites are contained within the other. So it's an integration of opposites. The coincidence of opposites is what Nicholas of Cusa used as a term in the West, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I might reformulate my term or my terminology. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you should.
What?
I don't think you should, because the word is actually correct. Coincidence means things that happen, or as the Buddhists would, arise at the same time.
That's true.
But
That's
maybe
true.
in our civilization,
Yeah.
we've come to think that if things happen at the same time, there must be something wrong with it.
Yeah. That's nice. That's nice. Okay, I take that back. Yeah. This is how we learn in dialogue. Do you want to say? Coexistence. Yeah, that's nice as well. See, this is where we need terms to describe other ways of thinking, other thought systems. You want to say? Yeah.
In Taoism itself, there's this interesting relationship between, say, textual Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, the Chuangzi, and Liezi, these texts that are quite old in the Chinese tradition, and yet the practice of Taoism, there's no historical record until about the 2nd century of the current era. So there's this interesting tension within Taoism between the philosophical Taoism and the practice of Taoism, often associated then with heavenly masters. Within both of these sides, that, and not to make a dualism, I think it's much more complicated than that, but within textual or philosophical Taoism, you get this interesting tension that the Tao Te Ching says, someone who's talking about the Tao, they don't know what they're talking about if they're trying to formulate it or put words onto it. So it's this interesting coincidence of opposites, silence and speaking, that somehow or other the Tao Te Ching has all of these words talking about the Tao, and yet it starts out by saying, you can't talk about the Tao. So there's an interesting tension there. And on the practice side, one of the early examples came up in a comment about Taoism and the revolutionary character, that the Yellow Turban movement is the first example in the 2nd century, in the Han period, where the term Taoism and a self-identified Taoist group emerges. So you get this sense of the Tao is constantly pushing back against imperial rule, and he would eventually also move to the center of imperial rule over the period. But what consistently emerges with the heavenly masters and the practice of Taoism is that there is a cultivation of an inner landscape in relationship to the outer landscape. So there's this interesting coincidence of, I don't know if opposites is even the right word here, but the coincidence of presences that are different, other than one another. So I'm cultivating my interior landscape even as I look out on the landscape of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, that picture over here is a magnificent example of these two fish, black, and you probably can't see it right here, but what a beautiful dance of the coincidence of opposites. Yeah.
That is very true, but also because they believed in how the small things affected the big things.
Mm-hmm.
So by cultivating their inner landscapes, they would indeed influence the big ones.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a back and forth. And one very interesting thing is when you were talking about the differences of the Confucianist and the Taoist version of how Qi works.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the Confucian, the rights, the respect, etc. It's important to notice at the same time, especially in today's world where we are so concerned about science,
mm-hmm.
that according to the Taoist view and also the Confucianism, Qi is actually the basis of everything. Mm-hmm. It's just a big spectrum,
mm-hmm.
meaning that what we do on the philosophical level will eventually, determine how we approach things,
mm-hmm.
and I find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think, back again to the question of Wu Wei, how do we most efficiently engage our current leaders and politics in the practice of Wu Wei.
He's persistent. And he's got a very important question. Years ago, going through the Forbidden City in Beijing and noticing over one of the imperial throne rooms, Wu Wei is there in big characters, right? And Wu Wei, as a political philosophy, means that you sit facing south and everyone feels the currents of qi. Everyone feels the currents of the movement of who you are. And the world will be ordered in that kind of framework. So between that kind of political philosophy and where we need to go today, let me lift into the impossible and entangled world and the web of China. Okay, so we have been going back and forth to China for a number of years, since '85 actually, and if you take what's happening in China and India in terms of modernization for over 2 billion people, it gives us all cause for pause and sitting or doing Tai Chi and being grounded, because it's over the top, and the effect on air, water, soil, etc. is incredible. But the Chinese understand this. They're trying to work towards ecological civilization, which has its problems and its promise, like almost every idea right now, the problems and promise. But and this notion, it's on a government level, it's academics working on it. The revival of Confucianism is very real in China. One woman, Yu Dan, who's really a sociologist and a journalist, not trained in the Confucian classics, wrote the commentary on the Analects, Confucius's sayings. 10 million copies sold. It's astounding. 10 million copies. You can, in the schools now, the classics, Chinese classics, are being taught, which was certainly not happening because of the Cultural Revolution and so on. So there's a revival of Confucianism on many levels. The students we've taught in China and Korea over the last few years actually know their classical texts again. I mean, in a moderate way, but they know them. They know the names and they know that some of the big ideas. This is amazing, because I didn't think in my lifetime I would see in mainland China these traditions being practiced again. That's true for Buddhism as well. The Buddhist monasteries and the pilgrimages are quite vibrant, and so, and of course commercialized and everything's mixed. But let me just give one example to answer your extremely important question. So we're in Hunan province, where these conferences that Du Weiming, this very distinguished Confucian scholar who's at Beijing University, was asked to come back by the Chinese from Harvard, where he was teaching for many years, because they realize the humanities are losing ground, as they are in the West, to science and technology. And so he has been doing conferences in the Yellow River Valley, the heartland of China, in Hunan province, way out in the western part of China, on the border of Xi'an, in fact. So, and this is at a Confucian academy that's 1,200 years old. It's 1,000 years old. And at this conference comes all of the ministers from that province, 90 million people. It's staggering, in one province. And the governor, his ministers, and they're all listening throughout. Most of the meetings are at a hotel, but we go back and forth to this historical site. They're sitting in the front row. The minister for economics, a woman, gets up and says in a public discussion, we need a circular economy. We need cradle to grave. We need a no-waste economy. That is Wu Wei. You see right there. Now, your politicians in Scandinavia would understand that. Our politicians, it would be unthinkable to say we need a no-waste economy or a circular economy. Of course, it's being pushed and so on. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm simply saying there are examples of people trying to put this into even a political system, even in such a complex country as China right now.
Can you relate that to the transforming powers of heaven?
So one of the things I love most about Confucianism is in the doctrine of the mean, with M-E-A-N, but mean meaning the middle, the center, finding the balance. And in that text, there's a passage which I think about often. And if I understand it in my lifetime, I think it will be, like a Zen koan, kind of you break through. So the idea is that we are part of, humans, the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. The transforming and nourishing powers of heaven. Just that phrase is amazing. And you can say the powers are all of these great forces of nature. You see? And that's chi, very much chi, in its transformations, continual transformations. And one of the great Neo-Confucian phrases is, sheng sheng, which means life, life. It's like you go back to the I Ching, okay, the early book of changes. Everything is changing, but we're harmonizing with those changes. That's what the book of changes was trying to do. And in medieval, what's called Neo-Confucianism, the idea was bringing that forward, this sense of we are in harmony with, aligned with the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. Nourishing food, water, air, soil. But the other part of it, so the idea here is that we are aligned, and actually they use the term, we are co-creators with those powers. That is amazing. And again, I'm not trying to idealize this. This is difficult. But alternative energy, solar power, these are all aligning with the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. We're doing it, you see? We just need to do it faster. But we can do it. It's an energy revolution. The other part of that is we are transformed by the transforming, nourishing powers, right? We transform them, they transform us. So what does this reciprocal resonance mean? And I think that is, a way forward as we align ourselves with these creative powers, which we're doing. Maybe we take one or two more questions and then, we could go on all night, but I know some of you have other things. So there maybe one or... Yes, in the back.
So I'm curious about the question of story and identity, because it seems like we're in an impasse where we've kind of gone astray, have lost our way a little bit. This is in the last few years with the Brexit and the emergence of nationalist governments in Europe and in other places of the world. And there's something about this, like at least up until 2015, I was like sort of carried by this romance of sort of the global consciousness and global empathy, and you mentioned Teilhard here in your paper, and the sense of that there's an evolutionary impulse on the earth, and that we take part in that. And now it feels like there's been some like a we're not sure if we're going back or we're taking a step back or what's happening there. So I'm just curious about this question of do you think it's important to have a sense of story or narrative about who we are as a global community?
Yeah, that is a great question. I presume you all heard it. Is there a need for a larger story, a narrative that brings us together, especially when this regression moment of nationalisms and so on is on the horizon? Teilhard de Chardin, who you just mentioned, a French Jesuit priest paleontologist who spent many years in China, has been an inspiration for some of our work. And his vision came out of being a stretcher bearer in World War I in France, in some of the most horrendous fighting and suffering that humans have seen. We know we are in a period of great suffering, tremendous suffering. And so to be anecdotal and then to be a little more serious, we've been to Iran 3 times. The government there has had high-level conferences on environment and Islam and the future in conjunction with the UN Environment Program and so on. The whole of the ministers from their government have come every single time. Many of them speak English, as you know, many of them educated in the West, reaching out to what's called a dialogue of civilizations with the UN. We come out of Iran, the last trip last year. We come to Istanbul. We'll go around Turkey. We're back in the airport. I see over here Jewish people in Orthodox dress. doing their prayers. We get on the plane. We are all on the same plane from Istanbul to New York. Jews from Israel, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, because it's their high holy days, and they're on the plane. They're being fed kosher food. I'm sitting next to one next to me. There's Christians on the plane. There's Muslims serving us on the plane. This happens every single day. And you go to airports around the world, and we get off in New York. Everyone's helping each other take their bags off the plane. You know, we are forming, despite tremendous setbacks, because people are afraid. And fundamentalisms arise from fear and insecurities. And so on a compassionate side, we can see why. But those of us who've been given education and privilege, and I take Europe, honestly, as a great inspiration, and also before 2015 especially, the creation of the EU after 2 world wars is an amazing accomplishment, despite everything. And it has its tremendous challenges right now. But so let me come to your question, your important comment of, yes, we need a story that brings us together. And that's why we referred to our teacher, Thomas Berry, who had this idea in 1978, a small book. You go on the website for Thomas Berry, a new story. And he's saying we've got to bring together scientific evolution and ecology together with a sense of spirituality, ethics, and a viable and vibrant future. So that's why we did Journey of the Universe, which is a film. It was on PBS in the US for 3 years. Unbelievable because of evolution being contested there. It won an Emmy. There's a book that goes with it. There's a series of conversations where I interviewed scientists and environmentalists saying why this story brings us together and how it brings us together. We've shown it in many, many parts of the world, shown it in China many times. Twice it almost went on CCTV. That's how much the Chinese are yearning for it. It's in several European languages. It's in Chinese and Korean, Indonesian, Turkish. We saw it in the airport in Turkey. What I'm saying is this was a project of many, many people helping us. But it is a yearning for a story that gives vibrancy, connection, and a sense of a viable future. We have online classes right now. 22,000 people are watching them. And our future work is to lift this out even further. You know, it's all open source, trying to make it available and so on. And that's the reason we're giving you those little brochures, is just to follow up and hopefully enjoy and share these resources. And we'll make sure you get the film through Pamela and this center. So thank you for that comment, and it's an offering into our times. Okay, yeah.
Short questions. I remember, I think it was in 1995, we were in Beijing visiting different temples, not the ones we have shown, but we went to a major Confucian temple. It was the most deserted, neglected place in Beijing, in a way, of that order. I've been back several times later, but never had the chance to go there. Would I find it in the same condition, or would it be different, referring to your emphasis on revival?
Yep.
And the outer things are also, although of course the deeper things and so on.
Right. So I'm sure our friends from China can tell us more specifically, but I would definitely imagine it is restored. You know, this deliberate destruction of a tradition, I don't think has ever happened in history on such a scale as the Cultural Revolution over 10 years. And those Confucian scholars who fled to Taiwan and Hong Kong and kept this tradition alive and in dialogue with Western philosophy are some of my heroes, a few of whom I know, but because they did it against great odds. And so what has happened is this revival, as I mentioned, which can be ideological, can be politically used and so on. But there's a spiritual vacuum in China. Young people stay at home in their apartments and play games because they have no sense of a viable future. And I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. This is true in Japan too. hyper-materialism is not a satisfying way forward. So, yes, there's a restoration of Buddhist temples, of Confucian temples, of Taoist temples, and so on. There's been a movement for Taoism and ecology in China, with some of our friends working on that. So, we need traditions even though they're not fully satisfactory, which is why Journey of the Universe, for many of our students at Yale who are not particularly religious or trained in religion, that when they see this rich science, ecological, evolutionary perspective, they actually regain their sense of hope, of purpose, of connection, of empowerment, that they can make a difference. And that is what I think is most important, to give an intergenerational handshake. So maybe was there one more question, then we'll end? Okay, and if not. So I would love to say, we just talked about an energy revolution aligned with the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. And I think that is so coherent with the inner energy revolution that Pamela and many of you here have cultivated, are sharing with one another. And I feel it so beautifully, so richly in this room. This is far from flattery. I've spoken to many, many groups, but I would say that that dynamic, transforming energy, that sense of chi that we all share, is one of the most important ways forward. I thank Arne Næss for birthing Deep Ecology. I thank Gru Brundtland for birthing Our Common Future. I thank Thor Heyerdahl and some of your great explorers for showing us the world and his concern for peace too. But I thank each one of you for the work you are doing and will continue to do, and we will hold it deeply in our hearts. Thank you very much. Thank you.
John, thank you. I've got myself knotted up here.
Okay.
Maybe we can hear the gong.
Yeah.
It is not any problem when I feel such extraordinary inspiration and hope. You bring so much hope. Not only are you a wise woman, you're an American, and it's really opened my spirit to see that hopefully what is going on in the broader realm of things right now is there to wake us up. So this is indeed a very precious moment for the Tai Chi Center. We like to feel that we're holding a sacred energy here, a sacred energy of service to the Norwegian people, and also that we can have a global perspective on what walks into the path here. We are on the way. The way is here. It is now. The Tao is now, beyond words, and really through the breath and sharing of the human heart. I know that we can go beyond any words to find new solutions in new constellations. So, resting my prayer with you and your dear husband, John, I would love to share what I have, which was delivered to me to the center just a year ago by Tor Arne, this beautiful gong. Some while ago, people would come to the Tai Chi Center, and as you see, I am, like you, an extraordinary human being. Am I not? Are you not? We are extraordinary. So let's open our hearts and minds to that possibility of who we have not yet become. And together we can grow and enrich each other's spirits through this quiet silence that we can share this evening. And my gift to you and to this precious moment for the Tai Chi Center with your presence and blessing and Arne's guidance that's brought you here. I would love to share with you the gong. This gong is the heaven gong. It's the number 1 in a series of 15 gongs that will be given to the planet to bless Mother Earth. And with that, I have named it She Gong. And if we look closely at the word she, it does have he in it, after all. So let us open our hearts, take a relaxed posture, and I would love to dedicate the next 4 or 5 minutes to your personal prayer, to your personal extraordinariness for being alive at this moment, being with these essential, extraordinary beings from America. Let's have it for America. Let's have it for Norway. Let's have it for the whole planet. In Tao, right now. So, my friends, my Pandora's box. It's a small gift. Sound is not so attractive. There are two handmade bookmarks. I understand you love books. And so it's a small gift for you both.
Beautiful.
For your journey to books. And with books, I will be with you.
Thank you.
All the way.
Love it.
And of course, there has to be a book with it. And so I have dug deep.
Beautiful.
And from my silk blouse, I have managed to create this feature. This is a book which is a collector's version of the Chinese classical books made from silk.
Beautiful.
It's the applicant of the analytics of Confucius, no less.
I love it.
And so,
Oh, beautiful. Oh my, thank you so much.
within the book, every page is made of silk. And hidden within the books are some stamps. Do you remember what stamps were? We used to put them on things called letters and put them in the mailbox. So, by all means,
This is beautiful.
some of these stamps are coming from the emperors of past Chinese civilization.
Thank you so much.
The text, fortunately, is also in English.
Yes.
So I hope you will enjoy together, Confucius scholar as you are. As a Taoist, you need nothing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
lovely.
you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you.
And from Norway, we have Norwegians. Thank you, all of you, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So the extraordinary point that also Mary Evelyn and John have done, they've opened up an extraordinary sacred teaching of the divine school in Yale University. This is something that uncannily I thought would be impossible in my life. And to have met the people who have established this and done it, it's an extraordinary moment for me to join in the celebration that you have achieved this as academics, to bring the divine schools of indigenous cultures and the sacred teachings of the world, no less, to an academy and a university. So our blessings are with you. I hope you will return to the Taiji Center, but also to Norway, that I may introduce you to the Sami people and the local indigenous people here, and also to maybe next time do a little Tai Chi with us.
We love
If we again can hear the song of the gong,
Yeah.
we'll come.
Sure.
That was amazing.
Yeah, we'll call you back.
Oh, call us back.
It's a dinner gong, so next time I'll give a dinner gong.
You did. May we thank this extraordinary founder of the Tai Chi Center and our host for this evening. Thank you so much. And over to the side, I think Alida, is someone who has helped establish the Arne Næss Institute and continue his work. So let us thank Alida also. We will carry this work on with your help and your blessings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So safe journey. We've made a lot of tea, which is full of chi. So please take a cup before you go and share your good warm energies with one another before you go out into the relatively warm evening for Norway. I don't know if that's good or bad, but anyway, stay close, everyone. Stay close. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. That was lovely. Oh, just lovely. So special. Very
so that I've met you and so appreciate such a profound opportunity, and how to keep in touch with you.
We will.
With my prayers, but also if there is some real, on-hands journey of the universe.
Yes.
I would love to help to build and grow this knowledge and have people on hand that
they would
help to
love
facilitate
that. I would love that.
So that we can bring it through the practice, the spirit of practice. We didn't talk too much about that. Maybe this evening, like meditation, the actual meditative aspect of practicing. I would love to bring that forward.
Definitely.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you very much for accommodating me. I'm Chris.
Is this yours?
With my
Yes.
problem.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I
thank
hope it
you very
works.
much.
I hope
Thank you
it
for
works.
a lovely evening.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
There's another one that I'm hearing.
Oh, I thought it was as well.
Hi, my name is Karen. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your talk, and also what Pamela said. I think it's amazing that you have achieved to bring spirituality and divinity into academia. I think that's very special. And
well, it was very interesting you said that at the very end, because it's been extremely challenging, as you can imagine.
I think in the academia, the idea of spirituality and consciousness as something different than materialism is very much challenged and doesn't have any respect.
Yes, exactly. So, and we actually kind of say we're ninja, working in a very complex system, because you can't do it straight on. But students understand, and that's all that matters.
Do you know Freya Matthews?
I don't know her personally, but yes, I certainly know her work.
Exactly. Because I had this association when you spoke.
Make a difference.
The idea that
I was on the
change comes from the way we view the world, and viewing the world from the basis of chi or the basis of consciousness is something else than viewing the world from the basis of materialism.
With all of the
so
very little organic
change
life.
has to come
Absolutely.
from that sort of level, which is very deep.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I loved I could see your face was very engaged and, bright and alert. And so I appreciate that a lot.
Very much looking forward to this film.
Yes.
And very happy to have met you and heard your talk, and as Pamela said, I hope you'll be back, because this is really important work I am very passionate about.
Wonderful. Well, I can see that, and I'm sure we will be back. I'll give you a big hug.
Thank you.
All the best.
All the best. Yes, to you too.
Great. Karen, I'll remember. Very good. Hello.
Some women who gather plants, they say, when you go out and you're looking for something, the first plant that you see, don't take it. And then you go to the next, and then you see more, and don't take the
Well, that's a great question.
And
I mean,
they
part of
say
it
then,
is to practice Tai Chi or Qigong, or
you can
keep
gather.
the
And like
spirit
the water,
flowing.
sometimes the plants say, no, not this
And I think
time.
to keep positive, keep hopeful,
and I like
not to get discouraged. And your generation is going to be so important in these changes. What is your area now? What are you doing?
I'm a violinist.
I
studied psychology, and because of this, I want to go into medicine because I want to try to
that's
do
interesting.
something
Because
very
compressed stone,
sort of develop a voice. I hope will be heard. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because my sort of idea relating to what you said about the Li energy, I was really thinking about
enormous amount of electricity.
so I sort of see the world as connected.
You want to call this gentleman in the back?
Each of us will create ripple effects with everything we do. So that will sort of create butterfly effect.
Yes.
We're having a wonderful conversation about water.
Now,
And he visits
everything
the
that I do is
water
something
quite often, if not
or I
every
try to
day.
do
He
everything
says sometimes the
that I
water's